Okay. So it's been just over a year. I didn't actually look at the previous discussion, but I noticed it was in early April as opposed to the end of April.
Yeah.
And I thought about reviewing it, listening to it again. I couldn't face it, to be honest with you.
Exactly the same with me.
And it made me wonder why not. I mean, part of it, I just don't like listening to myself and all of that. But there was just something about it that I just didn't want to hear.
Yeah, me too. I was thinking why.
Yeah.
And for me, a part of it was like I felt like I just couldn't bear to go backwards, back a year, and be exposed to that again.
I think there's something about that, but it made me wonder whether, in a strange way, there was an optimism in it that I don't feel anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
At different levels, an optimism around maybe the amount of time that we were going to be facing this.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe more importantly, the outcomes of it, that things might change in a significant way, maybe for the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I feel quite so strongly about that anymore. I wish I did.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling something very similar, that at the beginning it was shocking and exciting, but also partly there was the sense this was an opportunity for something fundamental to shift or to be addressed somehow.
Yeah.
And like you, I'm not feeling that now. And when I was thinking about, when we spoke about having another conversation, and we both kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, well, I don't know if I have anything to say.
Yes.
I thought about that too, just for the last couple of days. And I feel like, having had a couple of days of more direct exploration of my experience, that it is feeling a little bit clearer to me. I don't feel quite as blank.
Okay, good.
I certainly don't feel like I did a year ago.
Yeah.
But that I was curious, why the blank? Why it's almost like I'm looking through a frosted window or something. I can't really, everything's opaque. And I wondered about that. And I feel like there's just a very strong tension between a desire to go back to something familiar and something secure, and feeling like there's a clear end to this. It's like, Wednesday it'll all be over. Thursday, everything will be back to normal. On the one hand, wanting that. And on the other hand, feeling like something has changed, and I'm never going to be convinced by that again. And even the little forays I've made into town to go back into shops that are open now, it doesn't feel the same. I quickly go into a shop, I quickly leave. I don't want to go into town. It's not exciting. I don't like being around people like I used to. Something has fundamentally changed, and it's not automatically reverting to a previous experience.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that that's a temporary effect? Let's not underestimate, we've had over a year. We've had, for me, I guess it's been closer to about 15 months now of, in a sense, kind of real serious lockdown.
Yeah.
Avoidance of people, inability to engage with them, all kinds of things that you've been talking about. And that's a long time. I mean, it's a prison sentence.
Yeah.
And just like I imagine a prisoner coming out of prison, I would imagine at first there's almost that sense of I just want to stay in my prison because I have a sense of that. I know what it is. I may not like it, but I know what it is, as opposed to all the unknown possibilities of stepping out. But maybe that's just temporary.
Yeah, I've wondered about that as well. And on the one hand, maybe it would be nice if it was temporary.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be nice if we could go back to something and authentically or in a real way kind of live in some semblance of what we used to know as life.
Yes.
But I also wonder if it isn't almost a kind of a betrayal not to learn something really profound about ourselves and about our societies through this whole strange, almost trial of the human species. It's like, let's see what happens if we lock them down and start killing some of them. I feel like the kinds of things that are being said now about the psychological impact of this pandemic are the predictable kind of mental health stuff. And it's all within a very predictable story of, mental health responses and psychological responses to anxiety, depression, blah, blah, blah. And it's just all neatly packaged. And I do think that in some way, something else has also happened, that we have had to face the humiliation of our species.
Yeah.
That as human beings, we're not as special as we thought we were. We are contingent upon nature's ability to wipe us away, potentially. And just the profound uncertainty and lack of control and the insight that potentially gives us. I mean, could we not live in a way that has a little bit more openness to all of that, that aspect of human being, which has always been there, but has been very easily covered over by the way we live? Can we not bring back at least some aspect of that deeper openness to, uncertainty, not knowing, the anxiety of that, and to not cover it over again?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, in some ways, there's a counter push to all of that through the governments, the media, the messaging that we receive all the time, which is about security, which is about protection, which is about, avoid this, don't do that, stay here, wash your hand, all those things that add to the fear of what you're talking about, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of openness. And I guess in some ways, some of as much as I'm, I have very little sympathy for them, I think some of the recent rebellious reactions to all that are perhaps a kind of explosive expressions of what you're talking about. They're almost like that, that underground reaction to too much security, too much protection, too much containment. And because there's no acceptance of them, they express themselves in a very, very harsh and, violent way.
Yeah, I think that's quite possible. The only thing I'm thinking is I don't imagine that those particular crowds are saying, um, let's let go of the control and see what the world could
Yeah,
possibly be. I think they're
yeah,
saying, let's let go of the control so that we have it the way we used to
yeah.
have it.
No, I agree with you. I think it's just some kind of reaction, a kind of, maybe misguided, but certainly um, kind of unconsidered reaction. It's a kind of gut level,
Yeah,
I don't want this.
yeah,
And if you ask me why I don't want it, I might not be able to tell you. I just know I don't want it.
yeah, just a real gut
Yeah,
level frustration or something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, which makes me think of, I'm trying to remember the term now, Rollo May's term for that kind of explosion of experience that happens when things are too contained, too protected. Oh gosh, what is the term? Um, anyway, it'll come to me. But it's a really it's powerful in the sense that
Mm.
he's saying, when societies have no means to give expression um, to the more open, to the more explosive,
Mhm.
then it moves underground. It moves into an uncontrolled territory. And because of that, then it usually expresses itself in damaging or violent or
Yeah.
aggressive ways.
Yeah.
And the more enlightened societies actually find ways of allowing expression of this.
Yeah. To sublimate it and channel it through artistic expression and
Yeah, through any
large group activities.
yeah,
Yeah.
or through rituals. So he talks about societies where things like the Mardi Gras and so forth originally
Mhm.
had that means of allowing a kind of, a complete alteration of social mores and social relations and so forth. It kind of gave vent to things.
Yeah.
Uh, Gosh, I wish I could remember what the term is. I've used it so many times, and it's just anyway. Um, what what struck me in terms of my experience, which maybe links to what you've been saying, is that when I thought about what are we going to talk about, is there anything we're going to talk about, and so forth. The only thing that I could come up with was how my experiences are very contradictory at the moment. So that, on one hand, it felt appropriate to have a second discussion, and at the same time, I could feel my sense of I don't really want to do that. I don't know if I want to do this. What have I got to say anyway? Haven't got anything to say, and so forth. And when I thought about that more, what came to my mind is that the strange thing about this, for me, about this past period of time, is that I've actually had much more regular contact with friends.
Mhm.
I meet with a group of friends every Sunday online, on a weekly basis, and we just talk and exchange what's happening and so forth.
Mhm.
And these are long-term friends; they're really close friends. But prior to the lockdown, we might have met at most maybe once a month, maybe longer than that sometimes, maybe a few times a year.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, since the lockdown, we've had much more of a social interaction, a meeting. And we've never been lost for time, for words or things to say. It's been really flowing and natural, and really something to look forward to as well. But at the same time, I really miss them. Even though I'm seeing them, I miss them in a way that I didn't feel I missed them when I saw them less regularly.
Yeah.
And the missing is the physical aspect of it, I think, that, I can only see them and I can only see a part of them, but I can't get close to any other sensory experience of them.
There's something about the just the little movements that a person makes standing in the kitchen,
and just I suppose it's being able to be near them, to to grasp them, to smell them, to just all those things that that really make the connection so much. I don't know if it's stronger, but certainly I think it is stronger, actually, and certainly different.
Yeah, it's like it infiltrates deeper down, a few more layers down, the molecules inside are touched.
Yeah. So it's this strange thing, so that at the end of our sessions, our weekly sessions, I always have this feeling of, oh, it's been great. It's been great to see them, and I wish I could see them. It's both those things at the same time.
Yeah.
It's really, and I suppose at a more everyday level, I notice that if I'm going outside to do some shopping or whatever, and somebody walks by me, or I walk by somebody, and the space between us is less than I'm used to, or whatever, there's this immediate kind of stepping back reaction, which is usually paralleled by the other person as well. So it's almost like we both find ourselves stepping back. And then there's this other reaction that comes with it, which is this kind of almost apologetic smile that we give each other, almost like, I didn't really mean that, and I really would like to be able to be next to you, but I can't, and then we
don't take it personally.
Yeah, don't take it personally. Yeah. And it's that contradiction again, on one hand, don't get near me, but on the other hand, I'm really sorry that that I won't let you do that, and you won't let me do that.
That's interesting. I have a different experience. One is, one of the interesting things from what you've said is that the collapse in geographical distance. It's like probably when you met your friends once or twice a year, you wouldn't have thought, hey, let's all meet online.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't have even thought of it.
Never occurred to us.
No, exactly. Same with me. But I notice with my online work that I really don't want to be online meeting friends or family. All my family's in Canada. And I just, when I actually do it, I do enjoy it, but I avoid it. And I avoid it in preference for going down to the dog park with my young dog. And that's become my social life twice a day. These people who were complete strangers, a few months ago, are now my contact. And it's interesting to me that they are the people that I'm in physical contact with. We have something in common. We probably have more than just dogs in common. We're getting to know each other. These are people I probably wouldn't have gotten to know without a dog. But just in the strange circumstances, they're my little oasis of human contact. And I think I underestimate how important that's been to me. Really important to me. And on the other hand, passing people on the street down here in Brighton, people aren't generally giving each other space anymore. It really feels that people have leapt ahead to this is all over now. The lockdown's easing. We've had one vaccination maybe. And I'm not ready for that. And the joggers that jog right past me, exhaling deeply, I'm like, oh, whoa, why aren't you keeping to the proper distance? And what it makes me think is at the beginning, there was more of a collective response. When I would go out for my 1 hour a day walk, then people would walk way out into the road to give each other distance, and there weren't hardly any cars around anyway. And now it feels like with the beginning of loosening of rules, that people have kind of collapsed back into their individual interpretation of what it means.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you go out now and it's a little bit of sort of every person for themselves.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think that's an important difference. Certainly that sense of this strange sense of, well, we're all in this in the first phase of the lockdown. And even with the stupid things like, clapping for the NHS and all of that, which, became something, organized and so forth. But initially, when that began, it was much more a spontaneous thing. Not so much in this country, but in other countries. I remember watching in Italians, spontaneously going out their window and clapping, or for each other more than anything else. And that then got taken up in other countries and so forth. But that sense of going at, stepping outside your door, seeing other people stepping outside their door, feeling a sense of real, I guess, connection in some strange way. And I think you're right. I think nowadays that has at the very least dissipated. I don't feel a connection to these other people walking down the street, or they're just other people.
Yeah, exactly.
Who have their own lives and their own experiences, and who, like you, I experience as still being largely potentially dangerous to me.
Yeah, exactly. And with the NHS clapping, and every country probably had their version of that, I found that tremendously moving.
Yeah.
I found it very emotional.
Yeah.
I still don't understand exactly why, but there's nothing like that now.
No, there isn't. And I think in some ways there isn't because maybe because of the manipulative aspects of it, I've become for sure much more cynical of it. I'm guarded. I'm thinking, this is Boris at it again, trying to whip up a sense of something. And in a way, it makes me think, I wonder if something similar like this happened in this country during the Second World War, where there was an attempt to manipulate a sense of connection and comradeness and all of those things. And some of it undoubtedly was there, but some of it also, I gather, people just didn't fall for it.
I think that's interesting. I think the initial standing outside and clapping, there wasn't any cynicism then.
Exactly.
It's like it was a pure expression of appreciation and care or something.
Yeah.
And recently there was one night when you're supposed to go out, either put a candle in your window or go outside and clap for people who had died. And when I heard that, I thought, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what is the role of that at least in the UK, of that kind of cynicism. And it reminds me of something. I was talking to the people in the dog park, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of something that came to me as one person was talking. And I thought there's a guardedness coming back because perhaps we've all experienced something that actually has been quite personal and quite profound.
Mm.
And to actually talk about it, to remain open to it, it introduces a level of intimacy that is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder why, like on the BBC or wherever in mainstream news, aren't we asking publicly, what effect has the lockdown had on you? How has the pandemic changed you? And inviting people to actually talk about their experience. And I think it's partly because it's intimate.
Yeah. 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 And it's intimate, it's individual experiences, but in a way they also tap into a kind of universal perspective.
Absolutely.
So somebody, yeah. But I've noticed while we've been talking that we're talking in a way almost in a kind of past tense. It's like it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in most of the world at the moment, it's nowhere near that.
Yeah.
If anything, in some ways, the virus is spreading at a much more rapid rate, at a much more dangerous rate.
Yeah.
And I guess there's that awful sense of, can we face yet another? What's my reaction to the thought of,
Yeah.
and for me, there's that contradiction again, because in a strange way, I go, oh God, no, please, no, not another. And at the same time, I go, but I know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I know what life is like under the conditions of another.
Yeah.
And so I can get on with it. It's no problem, I can find things to do. I can get on with my life. In a strange way, the possibility of yet another wave of the virus provokes a sort of security.
Exactly.
Going back to your point about, stepping outside and the insecurity of that, it's almost like after a year, this kind of way of being is the norm.
Exactly. It's the new normal.
Yeah.
And I've been like watching the news like everyone, I'm sure, and seeing the horrible impact of the virus in India at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the likelihood that variants will arise and they won't stay in India, they'll end up here. And one person in the dog park this morning, that's the source of all of my insight these days, was saying that he thought there was going to be another lockdown in the autumn,
Yeah.
September, October, at least by November.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I hadn't considered that. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, good. I thought, oh, thank God. There was a part of me that thought, oh, yeah, that's reassuring. And another part of me that thought, oh, no, I don't think I can stand that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But if I can go back to what you were saying, you and your dog park life,
Yes.
And your sense of what I heard you say was that, talking to people in the dog park is preferable than, say, talking with family or friends online. Is that right?
I hesitate to say that. It certainly, I seek that physical interaction with people much more than I would seek the online conversation. Once I'm in the conversation, it's different. I do enjoy it, and it does seem more real than I anticipated it would feel.
Okay.
But I certainly would, if you said to me, "Hey, Greg, do you want to go down to the park, or do you want to have an
Yeah.
hour online with your family?" I'd say, let's go outside. Definitely.
Right. And okay, so my guess would be, if you, whatever the limitations of the online discussion with your family, say, that there would be a depth or a quality to that discussion, an intimacy to it that is less likely to happen in the dog park discussions. The dog park discussions would be more, I don't know, general, social, talking about the news or talking about events, not having that depth to them that you might have with your family or your friends.
Well, that's interesting, because my first response when you say that is I would separate out, although I don't believe fully in this separation, but I would separate out the content and the process.
Okay.
The content of my conversation with my family would certainly look and sound more intimate.
Yeah.
Compared to the park conversation.
Right.
But the feeling of it, the park conversation, even if we're talking about the silly thing my dog is doing, it feels like a more profound, intimate connection with another living, breathing human being that's stumbling around in the dirt like I am.
Yeah. I can connect to that, and I think it connects to that sense I have of the conversations, the weekly conversations with friends online, and that sense of, oh, I really valued this and been with you, and at the same time, God, I wish I could see, I miss you in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. And it makes me wonder about psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen to psychotherapy if there isn't a clear end to this and people aren't rushing back to their offices? I know some people are at least thinking and going back to their offices probably. But if a large part of therapy remains online, I'm wondering how it's going to affect the way we practice, the feeling of being a therapist, for example.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I think, I think a number of people have begun to look at this, ask themselves about this. Mm-hmm. What is it to be a therapist when therapy is online? And again, I keep thinking of it in terms of contradictions. On one level, there's a sense of distancing and limitation and so forth. But at another level, there's a different sort of intimacy about this. A revealing, for one thing. I mean, we reveal more about who we are. I find myself maybe saying more about my own experiences in talking with clients than I might have prior to, the virus and so forth. Not that I was ever particularly overly hesitant about that, but I think it's opened up somewhat. And in that sense, the idea of the therapist, the anonymous therapist, which was always had issues around that anyway, but I think that's become even more of a questionable assumption around therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. One little example of that for me is previously I used to work online 1 day a week and then in person 2 days a week. And on that online day, my intention was to kind of hold the frame as if we were in person. So if the postman knocked on the door or something, I would never just get up and go and answer it in the
Yes.
middle of a session with someone.
Yes.
But now, at the beginning of lockdown,
Yeah.
it's like if I had a delivery, it's like, I'm sorry, I have a delivery. Can I just quickly go and get that? And it's like my life begins to intrude, or they see my dog walk behind me in the
Exactly.
frame, and then there's a little conversation about my dog.
Yeah.
And I've begun just recently, the last couple of weeks, wondering about that. It's like, hold on a second, Greg.
Yeah.
Should I really be jumping up and going to the door? And I mean, deliveries for a while started to feel like like a gift from God, and
Yeah.
you wouldn't want to miss one.
Yes.
But now I'm starting to think, hold on a second, this delivery thing has become kind of normal, and maybe I should be reasserting that
Yeah.
frame.
Well, again, it's maybe the question is the frame needs to be modified. We've assumed a certain kind of frame for therapy,
Mm-hmm.
with obviously with variations, but nonetheless, I think there's certain whatever elements or conditions that probably we've all agreed to as to what the frame should be like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your experiences, and certainly mine, have begun to question whether that sort of frame can be maintained.
Yeah.
And does that mean that therefore, no therapeutic frame exists any longer? Or does it mean that maybe the therapeutic frame has a flexibility to it that we hadn't considered before, or
Yeah.
were unwilling to consider before?
And maybe it's not something that should be imposed by the therapist, but something that should be relationally negotiated.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Because I certainly don't believe that, I could be wrong, but I don't believe that jumping up and taking 20 seconds to go and sign for a parcel and coming up and apologizing, I don't think that that is anti-therapeutic. If anything, it probably is more therapeutic. They get to see me run out of the room and sit back down. They get to see more of me. They get to see me apologize and be slightly embarrassed that I've interrupted the session.
It humanizes you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And in a way, I think therapists have had this tendency to see, when they say now I'm being a therapist, almost many of their human aspects have to be bracketed, put aside.
Yeah.
I have to almost be some whatever superhuman being, who's able to engage with you in this way. Maybe some of the fear around that has dissipated. Maybe you're not so fearful of letting the client see more of you, as you say. And not necessarily just fearful for yourself, but fearful for the impact of that on the client.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking that I think part of the fear is if we don't hold this rigidity, that therapy will collapse into just any old conversation or, a neighborly chat kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's true. I think it is absolutely possible to remain focused on the client's experience and the relational dynamics in a way that you don't focus on when you're having an informal chat with a friend.
Yes.
It doesn't become a friendship just because you let more of your humanity show.
Yeah.
And I think that's been conflated, those two things.
Yeah. But it does generate, I think in a sense, the perceived danger of that is that if the therapist becomes too human, then the degree of closeness and intimacy that might be generated for either or both participants may be something that becomes really overwhelming.
I wonder what you mean by too human.
I suppose I'll put it another way. I reveal myself through simple acts of answering the door, letting you see that I get excited by the arrival of a package in the post. Just ordinary little things that as a therapist, my tendency is to hold back from letting you be aware of, whether visually or in some other way. And it's those little things that, in a sense, draw us together. It's a little bit like what you were saying about your meetings with other dog people in the park, in the park. Even though you're talking in a certain way, there's some depth, some connection through that talk.
Absolutely.
That really binds you together. Now, on one hand, therapy tries to create something along those lines. It wants a depth and an intimacy, but of a different kind. One that's kind of unidirectional rather than mutually directional.
For me, the distinction, I don't know if this is the distinction you're making, but a distinction that comes up for me is the difference between a client getting interested in some aspect of my life and me sharing something about that. There comes a point in my sharing where I start to feel, it feels almost slightly queasy. It's kind of like there's something else going on here. It doesn't feel right to continue this.
Yes.
So there's that aspect. When you said too human, I didn't know if you meant that or something more like, I recently had a client who had told me of a very moving experience of being with a dying person. And as she told me, it was incredibly poetically conveyed and really moved me. And she said to me that she was aware that my father had died, a year and a half ago or something, and that this might be difficult for me to hear. And although that wasn't in my mind, I was very deeply moved by what she had said. That to me is much more the level of a real human, deeply human opening to mortality and the care around somebody leaving this world. That to me, it's appropriate that I'm moved and that's seen. It's a different kind of a disclosure.
I agree. And I suppose my reaction to that would be, I can see that within the kind of the accepted boundaries of therapy. I'm thinking that actually, you're getting up and answering the door and so forth, while it's a very surfacey, momentary, insignificant act on your part, it has something to it that changes the nature of your encounter with that person, because now you're showing them a version of you that that maybe would be reserved for other kinds of meetings, other kinds of encounters.
Exactly. And what comes to me as you say that is, it's not maybe so much that I'm showing it or that they're seeing it, but that I'm letting it be seen.
Yes.
I'm not hiding it.
Exactly.
And that's the important thing.
So you're not sitting there listening to the doorbell and going, oh gosh, that package, but kind of keeping it to yourself and not getting up and
straight face. No, I don't hear anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing that I'm wondering about therapy is, I think we really don't have any clue about the long-term implications of this strange experiment especially because it was global. The whole human species has gone through something profound.
Yeah.
And what the long-term ripples of that are going to be, I just have a blank about that. I really don't know. But I think it has accelerated some developments that were happening anyway.
Yeah.
And certainly in terms of technology, the role of technology, and in terms of therapy, I'm wondering if, because everyone's gone online for a while, and I don't think this is going to die out, and I think some therapists, including myself, might just stay online. I'm wondering if in training courses we're going to have now a module in online therapy, and what kind of a framework do you have on online therapy? What do you do if the doorbell goes? All sorts of things. Yeah. Hopefully not to kind of put it in a straitjacket again.
Yeah.
But as well as that, things like virtual reality therapy.
Yeah.
Because there is something about the flatness of this interaction.
Absolutely.
That if you're wearing a headset and you're both in a virtual space together, it does have a totally different feeling, and it does reintroduce some kind of intimacy.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if that's the direction that we're going to be headed.
Yeah. I can't imagine that it wouldn't go in that direction, especially now that, in a sense, the box has been opened.
Exactly.
And we've all experienced, maybe much recognizing that there's much more possibility than we'd assumed around this way of working.
Mm-hmm.
And not just at a pragmatic level of it's convenient and so forth, but that it allows certain things that maybe we hadn't expected.
Yeah.
In terms of, clients' experience of a more rapid intimacy, a willingness to speak more freely, more honestly, much more quickly than they might have in a face-to-face meeting. All those kinds of things that, and maybe that's also something that comes about because of the way the therapist is being, or is seen, or sees themselves in the setting, and the way that we've begun to reconsider what is therapy anyway, and what are we meant to be, what is it meant to be offering, and so forth. So I think you're absolutely right. I think the advances in the technology, and again, I'm guessing that with virtual reality, it's not only that you're moving into a three-dimensional space or a felt experience of a three-dimensional space, but do you actually have a sensation of, for instance, touching?
I think that will come, definitely.
Okay, that's not there yet.
Not commercially available, I don't think.
Okay.
But also, you can show up as an avatar. You can show up as.
That maybe is the weird thing.
There are so many weird aspects. I mean, and especially like boundaries. Like, is it okay if you show up as a bunny? Is it okay to sit on your therapist's knee when in fact you're on the other side of the city? You're not actually.
But stick with that example. Say you show up as a bunny and you sit on a therapist's knee. Do you have a felt experience of that?
Not at the moment with the technology I have. No, you don't.
Okay.
But it's, yeah, that it is a strange.
Yeah.
For me, I wouldn't be comfortable with it, though.
Well, again, I can sympathize, but are we saying that because in the same way we would have said 2 years ago, I'm not so comfortable with just exclusively working online?
Who knows?
Yeah.
And that gets to, I mean, I want to say one more thing about the
Yeah.
online. I
Yeah.
mean, this rush to online, it was interesting to me at the beginning how so many therapists were kind of panicked about it. And oh my God, I have to do a course in it before I can see a
Yeah.
client online.
Yeah.
That seemed to disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But it coincided with this huge shared event in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that has had a huge impact on our ability to be human.
Mm.
It just is a farce to pretend we're not affected by this as much as our clients.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that is a big impact on the way it's maybe the ease to going online is,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity for us to continue to connect when we're sharing something so strange.
Yes.
But the thing that I wanted to ask you just as we come to an end is how would you say that the pandemic and the lockdown has affected you? Has it changed you in any way?
Yeah. At an everyday level, what I've noticed is that even though I've been managing to do focused work and so forth, writing and doing things and speaking to people and so forth, as an overall sense of myself, I feel much less focused. My experience of existing has become not quite so. I don't know. It's fuzzy. Maybe that's the word. There's a fuzziness to my experience. Part of that is temporal. So there's a fuzziness to my days. Days, partly because of the repetitiveness of them, or the limited amount of things that I can do. They blend into each other much more.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's difficult to categorize or to remember. Was that yesterday? Was that 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Now, part of me thinks, is this my age? And am I is this? But I don't think so. I think it is related to what it's like for me to experience being under these conditions. And what that's done to me in a felt sense, I don't want to say my sense of feelings tend to be more extreme. I either go into a kind of feeling mode that is pretty flat and bordering on the kind of, I don't know what better word to use, a kind of unfeeling feeling.
Yeah.
At one extreme, and at the other, very easily and quickly being touched by something. So if I'm walking, I might have headphones on and I'm listening. Some song comes on. So one example of that was in the middle of, I still remember it very strongly because I was overwhelmed with feeling. It was in the middle of February and I was just strolling and I had headphones on and I had music coming on randomly, so I didn't know what was going to come on next. And suddenly this Beatles song, this George Harrison song, Here Comes the Sun, suddenly came on. and I stopped dead in my tracks, and I couldn't stop crying. I was just so overwhelmed by it. Partly because it was, it was so dark and in all kinds of ways, and so forth. And so I was, I was aware of how powerful the feeling was, and it tends to go to those extremes. It's either really powerful, overwhelming, tear-inducing moments, or a kind of flatness. And I think that's different to how things used to be, where there was more of a kind of somewhere in the middle of those more of the time. It's like I've lost control of them.
Yeah. 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 They come on, they overcome you in some way.
Yeah. With, things that at other times might not have moved or affected me anywhere near as much as say that song did, or something like that.
Do you have any insight into what it was about that song at that moment that?
Well, I think partly, the optimism of the song. Where it's been a long, long, lonely winter. And being in the middle of winter and thinking, oh God, yes, it has, and that sense of coming out of something. It also has personal connections, but mainly I think it's that sense of, that kind of breath you breathe when you feel you've come out of something that has been awful. And then looking back at the same time thinking, but I'm not out of it. It is still winter in all kinds of ways. And so the song is offering me something that on one hand I can connect to, and on the other hand, it's that missing bit again. I don't have the sun coming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there was that time on Earth when someone could have written such a song.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of hopeful.
And I think it is things like music, or something I might watch, some film or some program or something like that really triggers very, very strong reactions. And I think they are reactions that are about a remembrance of things, a sense of loss, and maybe what is there anything around the corner that would be the equivalent of that sense of optimism, or whatever that the sun is shining. But that was winter, and I think I still have those extreme, that kind of either flat or extreme, but with the sun actually shining, then something has changed as well more recently.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's linked to the opening up of the lockdown as well. I'm not so sure about that. I'm still, I haven't participated so strongly in some of the things that we can be doing now that a few months ago we wouldn't be able to do. Maybe that will change. If all goes well, I'm going to go on a trip to Scotland quite soon. And so maybe that will change things quite significantly for me. What about you?
I mean, strangely, I resonate with a lot of what you've said. And there's also a song that I can recall, that Simon and Garfunkel's "Bridge Over Troubled Water," which deeply moved me. And certainly some of the lyrics
Yeah.
that seemed to really epitomize the predicament or something that we were living through.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just was an opportunity to release some emotional reservoir that was sort of not finding its usual expression or something. But also the flatness and I can be focused when I'm working. I feel quite focused, and I enjoy that experience, because as soon as I'm done working, usually I'm not very focused. I am quite fuzzy and dispersed, almost in my being disperses into no other project almost,
Yeah.
because I'm avoiding projects. It almost seems too sleazy to get involved in too much of the kind of psycho industry generation of things at the moment. And I think if somebody had said to me, hey, there's going to be this strange time, you're going to have a year when you have very few commitments, you can't really do much, you could just work a little bit online and that's it, I would think, oh, great, like another sabbatical.
Yeah.
I'll get so much done. And I have been so unproductive. And I feel a regret about that. But that regret is based upon not being able to understand the flatness and the fuzziness. But at the same time, the sun has made a huge difference. And there's times out in the fields that I feel incredibly content and optimistic. So I think, like you're saying, there's kind of extremes of emotional states. And the optimism isn't linked to the easing of the lockdown, because there are, I could go to a pub and sit outside. I could, go to a shop. I'm not rushing to do those things. I've done them a little bit, but same with the people in the dog park. We're anticipating the date when such and such would be possible.
Yeah.
And a lot of that hasn't happened. Instead, it's been, the temperature's got a little bit warmer, or really bright, crisp mornings. And suddenly just that it's like nature is welcoming us back in some way or something. There's an expansiveness about it.
Let's hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Who knows what nature has in mind for us?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I remembered what the word is. It's the daimonic.
I was going to say that,
Yeah.
but I was worried it was the wrong word.
That's the one. So the daimonic.
Yeah.
And maybe there's something to it. Maybe we've all been closer to those daimonic moments in our lives.
Yeah, and maybe we will have the courage to kind of embrace with some honesty what we're actually experiencing and the mystery of it. And
yeah, I think it is a test at the moment, how the fact that we're questioning, are we just going to go back to and pretend that this was just some kind of, I can't remember what the program was. There was some program where some series that went on for years. And then at some point, the series begins, somebody walks out of a shower and you suddenly realize that the last 3 seasons that you've been watching were all just somebody's fantasy. And so they've managed to change the whole. So it's almost like, are we going to have a moment like that where we kind of almost erase everything?
yeah.
Or are we actually going to meet what has happened and what continues to happen in a way that is really creative and constructive and challenges us, that we're open to the challenge of it? And I think we're at that, maybe a year ago, we were pretty sure that we were going to meet it as a challenge. Yes, I'm going to go in there. And maybe we're now much more uncertain as to whether we will. That's not to say we won't, but we're just not so clear cut anymore. There's maybe it's something of that fuzziness or whatever.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's exactly what's happening. And what I want is that we ask some of the big questions. I mean, there's big questions like, will this lead to introduction of universal basic income, things like that.
Yeah.
But those aren't the big questions. The big questions for me are things like, what do we want to do with this species that we are?
Yeah.
You know, how do we want to continue this species if we do?
Yeah.
And what does that require?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that sense of what really matters to us.
Exactly.
You know, and it's almost like being aware. We've allowed ourselves to get caught up in things that we've told ourselves are important and really matter, but actually it takes something like this to realize that they don't mean very much at all, and that we've avoided actually exploring more deeply what is there that does matter to us, that really both individually and universally.
I would love that if that became the question on everybody's lips, is what really matters to us.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's a place to stop.
It feels like the stopping place.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, I think it was worth it.
I hope so. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay.
Bye for now.
Care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.